So hello from Green-mopeds in London. So today we're following up our static review of the Zeeho AE8s with a ride review, and we are on our way to our test track, the A30 between Staines and the M25, and we're going to see how we get on with it when we do our sort of test. Give you some background on it in case you haven't watched the static review. But Zeeho are, if you like, the electric division of cf-moto, and the importer into the UK is KTM, which is actually quite a good thing. Obviously, the bigger the manufacturer or bigger importer, the more they have good support, good part supply, and all of that sort of good stuff. I guess one downside is that they're quite picky about the models that they're going to bring in. So if you actually look on Zeeho's website, there are a whole raft of AE bikes, including an A2, 6, 8, etc., etc. We are getting the AE8s, which is their flagship, and the AE6, which is a 50-mile-an-hour bike, single battery, and then this one, and then a sort of street-style sort of mini Suron sort of thing, or a Talaria X3, but road legal, removable battery. To be honest, I'm not sure how that's going to really compete with something like a Talaria X3. But this one has got some good things about it, which hopefully you'll get to appreciate as we ride it around. I guess one of the first things to say is who's its competition. So as we showed you in the static review, the Segway E300se is sort of the competition to this bike, predominantly on the power side. So this bike has got 5 kilowatts nominal, but 12.5 max, and that puts it 25% more than the Segway at 10 kilowatts max. So if you had a drag race between the two of them, this one should win. However, having said that, as I've said to you before, the thing that drives acceleration is volts on the battery, and the Segway has 74 volt, whereas this one only has 69. So it would be interesting actually to compare the times. Obviously we're going to put the times up when we do our speed test, but it will be interesting to compare those times, because I have a feeling the sort of net will probably be about their equal. Especially if you consider that this bike is not hub driven. It is centrally driven with a belt. So that is pretty efficient, but not as efficient as a hub motor. Okay, so you're literally on a hub motor, obviously going battery controller motor. This is going battery controller belt motor. Sorry, motor belt wheel. And you are going to lose a little bit because of that transmission of power. So it will be quite an interesting little speed test, I think. Having said that, well, the Segway has a sort of boost mode as well, but this has it sort of implied, whereas this one has an actual button that you press. So when you get to 50 miles an hour in top sport mode, you could press the mode plus switch again and get a 30-second boost of power, which we will obviously try. And then after you use that 30 seconds of power, you cannot reuse it for 45 seconds. On the Segway, I don't know if you remember that, but on the Segway, when you sort of get to full speed and you keep going on the throttle, you see the sort of purple lines around the dashboard, which means it's in boost mode, and that gets you to over 60 in that bike. So again, it's going to be quite interesting. As we're here, So we're on a 40-mile limit, and I'm in eco, so the lowest mode. And you see flat out in eco mode is 37. So probably not enough for this road. So second mode, which they call street, is 46, and then sport mode is, well, they say ultimately top speed is 103 kilometers, which is sort of low 60s. It doesn't actually say in the manual if that includes what boost mode will do, so we're going to find that out. While we're on the subject of manuals, I have to say this is the most comprehensive manual I've seen. It's about 140 pages, and it's sort of what you'd expect a vehicle to have. It covers lots of things: belt tension, service regime, as in what should be looked at and all that sort of stuff. It is a mark, I guess, of a company that has been doing, vehicles for a long time, and they sort of taken it seriously. So that again is something that you get from these sort of bigger established companies. And also, something I did mention on the static review was sort of like the feel for the bike. So the feel for it is sort of quality. I'm not, necessarily sort of saying that all the others are not, but there's just a feel about this bike. It feels solid. The grips are solid. The layout of it is all very good and well proportioned. If you notice, there is sort of like this feet forward position. Personally, I don't like sitting like that, but you can do if that's what you'd like to do. And also, just to show you, it's got regen, and it does work. And this sort of brings me on to some of the things that you can do with the app, for example. So there is an app, and look at this screen, nice colour. It's got information that you need. The sort of slightly interesting thing about it is that time there, which is 8 minutes past midnight, is actually represented by those circles. So the outer circle is the minutes, and the inner circle is the hours. Okay, so as to why it's not showing UK time, when there doesn't seem to be a way of actually setting the time in the app or on the bike, I have not yet got an answer to that. It might be the same as something like an NIU where it sort of works it out, but obviously in this case not exactly correct, because it does know where the bike is. So yeah, that's the first thing to say about the dash. It's nicely laid out. They've also got this feature which the Zeeho Stash has now got, where you can do navigation replay onto the screen. Okay, so I've been playing around with that most of today, trying to get that working. And again, if there is one thing that's missing from the manual, is actually how to get that working. Because try as I might, I couldn't get the replay of my mobile phone onto the screen. But I'm sure that's just either me being silly or some little bug in the software. But it is something that they need to sort of explain better in the manual, because all it says is connect to the app and then you'll get screen replay, but that isn't how it is. That doesn't work like that. Okay, so as you can see on the dash, it's got state of charge, so we're at 77% speed, obviously range. So when I fully charged it and turned it on, it said 70. So 70-mile range, obviously based upon lowest speed, lightest rider, all that sort of good stuff. The batteries, if you do the maths on the battery, they're about 1.8 kilowatt hours each. And there's two under the seat, and there is space for a helmet. As to how big that helmet can be, that you can actually fit like this one, a flip helmet under the seat. I got a funny feeling you can't, but you can get an open face under it, and maybe some of the smaller full face ones. But those batteries are 1.8 kilowatt hours each, so that's 69 times 27 amp hours. Okay. If you compare that to a Segway, purely on the maths, the Segway are 2 kilowatt hours each. because they are 74 volt based, and they literally equate to 2 kilowatt hours each. And on the Segway, you can have 3. It comes with 2 by default. So if you have 6 kilowatt hours of battery versus 3.6, then clearly the one that's likely to win out on range is going to be the Segway. Okay, so if range is your thing and you want to pay the extra £850 for a third battery, which goes under the seat, because the first two under the floor, then range would be the Segway. Okay. Right. So state of charge. When you're in eco mode, it gives you some sort of indication of consumption. I mean, this is a screen protector, so you can't quite see it there. But when you go into eco mode, you see this little line here. This is showing you what consumption is. Not too sure why they don't do that in all modes, but it shows up in eco mode. And then you get your modes through here, plus, so you're in street, and then we're in sport. We'll test that properly later. Then you've got your indicators. Behind the camera is seat release and also cruise control. And then you've got kill switch, hazards, horn, etc., etc. Unlike the Segway, you actually have to cancel the indicators, whereas the Segway you can have auto-cancelling, as on a NIU. Underneath the little cubbyhole there, you've actually got 2 USB ports, one USB-A and one USB-C. So for your mobile phones and what have you, that's obviously quite good. And then you can see around the dash there, you've got your master cylinders for the front and rear brakes. So while we're talking about brakes, like the Segway, and like a lot of new models now that are turning up, they have ABS and traction control on this bike. Okay, so I guess part of the reason for that is obviously, you know, people expect more, but also this, like the Segway, has only got 12-inch wheels. Okay, and some people prefer bigger wheels. The 14-inch wheel has sort of become standard on NIU, for example. Horwin and Supersoco are actually a mixture of sizes, so 16 and 14, or 14 and 13, that sort of thing. But these two brands, Segway and Zeeho, are still on 12-inch. But if you think you've added in ABS and traction control, then I would argue that that's fine. You've sort of dealt with the potential issues of having smaller wheels. I mean, smaller wheels often are quoted as being less comfortable, I suppose. Okay, so that's that. While we're on sort of characteristics of the bike, it's just over 2 meters long. It weighs 130 kilos with both the batteries loaded under the seat. Those batteries are about, I'd say, about 11 odd kilos each, and maximum load is about 160, I think, 160 kilograms. So enough for 2 people, but not enough for 2 of me. All right, so yeah, nice layout. I can show you a bit more about the what you can get to behind the sort of settings of the bike when we stop. But I guess in summary, there's more that you can configure on the bike through the screen on this bike than on a Segway. Most of the configuration, in fact nearly all of the configuration on a Segway, is done through the phone. So there is an app obviously for this bike as well, and there are things that you can configure through it, but there is, as I said, a lot more that you can do through the screen on this system. Okay, as I said, look, it's midnight 16, so on the outside you've got a little line that shows 16, or just past quarter, and then that is showing that it's midnight. Curious as to why they bothered, to be honest. Okay, right, so just to cover this off, because we're stationary, colours are 2. To be honest, there's not a lot to choose from them because they both look pretty similar. One has got more black in it, and one has got a bit more silver in it, but pretty close. I mean, I wouldn't mind either. You know, if one's not available, I'm sure you'd be okay with with the other. Also, while we're here, we can cover off price. So one thing that Zeeho haven't yet done, or might not get done, is the grant. And that's probably for two reasons. One is that the sense is that the grant is going away completely come next February, although as of today, the government has just announced that it is reintroducing the 2030 rule for electric vehicles, which will include motorbikes, hopefully. And one is the time that it takes to get a grant. Okay, so it takes a bit of paperwork, and some manufacturers don't feel that that paperwork is necessary or is worth the end result. But obviously to consumers, it definitely is, because the price of this bike is $4,700, no grant, whereas the price of the Segway is $4,000 after the grant. In other words, $4,500 before the grant. So essentially what you could say is, for $4,850 you get a Segway with 3 batteries, but for $4,600 you get this with 2. That's one way of looking at it. And then back to the range discussion. Okay, so while we're stationary, you can see, hopefully from this, that the way to get into the menus is you press and hold this button, the down button here, and you get into this sub-menu, and then you go through the items that you want to configure. So when you find one that you like, press and hold, and then it gives you more information. So it talks about voltage 14.1. So yes, like the Segway, like many more bikes these days, you've got a little battery underneath the floor, and that is dealing with things like steering lock, alarm, and all that sort of stuff. So again, like we mentioned before, sometimes these little batteries, because they're lead acid, they've got, I think this one's got 5 amp hours of energy in it. If you leave these bikes over the winter or whatever, the chance of that battery, not necessarily the bigger ones, but the chance of that battery going flat is fairly high, I would argue. And therefore, if you can't start your bike, or you can't get out the steering lock or what have you, then that little battery underneath there is probably where you've got to look for charging. Okay. Talks about coolant. So yes, there's coolant in this bike, because it's, well, in some respects it's not like a traditional motor, but it's more like a traditional motor, as in there is, it's not a hub motor. It is still electric, but it's not a traditional hub motor, as in it's enclosed and things like that. So there is coolant that has to be added or managed, and that is referenced in the manual. So that will tell you what the coolant is. And then you've got other information here, service information, etc. The way you go back is press and hold the up arrow. Here you see the range, which will be shown on the other screen anyway. You go back again, and then you can go on to the navigation, which, as I said, was doesn't seem to be wanting to play these days. And then we get into settings, different units, devices that are connected, like your mobile phone, etc., etc. And then you've got the navigation screen, which it would be nice to show you, but I'll have to come back to that another time. Then there's your phone, if you want your phone to be connected, and all that sort of good stuff. Okay, but as I said, you don't get many of those options on the Segway. It's literally all done through the phone. Neither here nor there, it's just a difference between them. Okay, so what we're going to do, as we normally do, is we'll whiz down to the M25. We will try this boost mode. We've left the standard regen on, but as I said, you can increase the regen strength through the phone, but we'll leave it on. We'll whiz down there, see where we get to, and then come back and see how we get on with that. Okay, so I'll be back when there's a gap in the traffic. Right, let's go. 20, 30, 40, 50. So I should be able to put on boost mode now. Not convinced that the boost mode actually works or is having an effect. So I'm doing 65 already. 65 is its top speed, so it got there quick enough, and yeah, can't complain about the performance of it. It's just whether this boost mode that they talk about is going to have any effect. It does also have, by the way, reverse, which you get by pressing the minus mode button from mode 0 or eco mode, and that's all you have to do. So on other bikes, to use reverse, you engage your reverse and then you use the throttle. On this one, merely by pressing the mode minus button down, it goes into reverse, okay, and then it walks you backwards. Okay, so we'll just give it one last go back up, and then see what happens. But as you can see, regen, not doing anything, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's on its softest setting, and it feels to me like it's going to be equally as good as the Segway, in terms of if you turn it up strong enough, it will stop the bike for you and give you back some of that energy. I mean, it certainly picks up. I mean, look at that, 30. Okay, let's go. 50. 60. I don't want to say it hasn't got boost mode or the boost mode is not working, but I don't feel that there's a boost. One thing that you might want to remember is that this bike has a front-facing light, as in it doesn't have lights in the handlebars. Neither does the Segway, but some people do prefer handlebar lights, as in ones that turn into the corners with you. But not necessarily a reason for buying or not buying this bike, but it is just something to be aware of. So a few other things to talk about. Obviously, we talked about range, as quoted range. Notice that the quoted range has halved, as has the capacity that's left. So we've obviously used, since we started this morning, 53%, and it's still quoting a range of 38 miles, but we've only done 20 miles. Okay, Odo 20. So that would suggest, and obviously we've been flooring it essentially. If you were flooring it all the time, you might expect something like a 40-mile range from the batteries. Obviously, that isn't what you're going to be doing. So let's say 50 is probably more realistic, sort of mixed use. Then you've got charging. So Segway have now just introduced, or in the UK at least, because it was available elsewhere already, a dual charging cable for their batteries. So you can charge both the batteries off the bike at the same time, which until this point you had to charge them individually or buy two chargers. This one comes with a charger that charges both batteries off the bike together already by default. The other thing that this does, which you can configure through the app, is the charging rate. So, and it's pretty configurable, probably more configurable than you need. You can choose up to 1900 watts of charging capacity, and that is 22 amps. So, in other words, if you plugged it into a 16 amp charger, type 1, you could get this charging at that rate. The charger would support it. As I've said all along, though, that doesn't mean that you just plug this straight into type 2. You still have to go through the bike's charger, but at least the bike's charger supports 22 amp charging. Okay, so if you plugged it into a 32 amp charger, type 2, you would get up to 22 amps of charging. Okay, so that would sort of decrease, obviously, from a standard 13 amp socket all the way up to 22. You're almost adding a 50% decrease in charging time. So which is normally the case on all of these bikes. You're talking about from, if they were totally flat, you're talking about 5 odd hours with the standard 13 amp charging. If you therefore put it into a 22 amp charger, as in full capacity that the charger supports, then you should be able to bring that down by a couple of hours. So all good, and that's standard feature. That isn't something you have to buy or anything like that. Okay, so let's say that you've got, well, obviously you're still not going to have as much range as on a Segway with 3 batteries, because that's 6 kilowatt hours of battery, and this is only 3.6. But again, if you have the ability to charge it quite quickly, certainly during a working day, for example, if you take it into work, then can you live with that? And if you're doing fast speeds, will you be able to sort of cope with getting to work, charging it at work, and then doing fast speeds all the way home? Okay. So that's charging time. I think we've pretty much covered everything. Obviously, you've seen the top speed of 65. Things to note, or the niggles, not too many. The front-facing light only might niggle some people. I think there are a few software things that I need to sort out. So obviously the navigation through the screen would be great, but my background is actually software, and I think that needs to be either explained better in the manual or it needs to be fixed. What else don't I like? I mean, lack of choice of colours. That's not a big deal. Things I do like is that it's supported by a bigger manufacturer like a KTM. Shame they haven't put it on the grant to make it cheaper to buy. They did sort of suggest it was work in progress, but I think they might run out of time to do that if April is going to be when the grant goes entirely, and we're now in October. ABS, configurable app for GPS tracking, should help with insurance. 4,700 is on the higher end. I mean, that is the same price as just about, Segway 3 batteries. As I said, the CPX Pro, which is just coming, which is only 8 kilowatts though. A higher rated battery capacity on the CPX Pro will be on the grant. Has sort of basic app features, but enough. So it's got GPS tracking, but certainly not sat-nav replay as far as I know yet. We're getting one next week, so I'll be able to do a review on that. Small wheels, some people might not want small wheels, but it's got ABS. So all in all, a bit of storage. Haven't seen a rack option, but I think there is one. I'm pretty sure there is one. So again, as these new models come out, they sort of increase their capabilities. Okay, so we're now at 12.5 kilowatts for a 4,700 pound bike. That used to be less than a CPX with 2 batteries of 5 kilowatts and 56 miles an hour. So things are getting better as the technology improves. I probably would like to see a bit more battery capacity. Maybe they could have made it at least 2 kilowatt hours of capacity, or even better. But there is always a trade-off. So hopefully you found that useful. Please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This bike is available for test ride if you want to test ride it. And please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. And thanks very much.